at York University, but I'm not here in that role today. I'm just here to support People for Education and to facilitate this session on building a better parent-teacher relationship. So you have a sense of how things are going to run. I'm going to, in a moment, introduce our panelists. Each of our three speakers have been asked to respond to some questions and to give some thoughts from their own personal perspectives, which I'll reveal in a few moments. And then after they've spoken in about half an hour, I'll start taking a speakers list for questions and answers from you for the speakers. Okay, so I'd like to begin by introducing Andrea Higgins. She is a grade 2 French immersion teacher, with the Upper Grand District School Board. She's worked in both the French and English language streams, as well as in alternative education. She's particularly dedicated to working with children who struggle in the traditional classroom. She's a passionate believer in the power of helping students to grow academically by connecting and engaging their families with their schools. So, here, Andrea. Second, I'll go in order here. In the middle, we've got Jacqui Strachan. She's the mother of 2 sons, and she's been actively engaged in education issues for over 15 years. Former lawyer, Jacqui has worked full-time at People for Education for the last 12 years, speaking to parent and education groups and providing telephone and online supports to parents across the province. As the Director of Outreach and Parent Support, Jacqui helps to develop multilingual tip sheets for parents, coordinates a network of parents and community agencies around the province, and runs workshops to help engage parents in their children's education. And third, we have Dr. John Ippolito. He is an associate professor in the Faculty of Education at York University. His research in teacher education centers on educational practices in the context of linguistic and cultural hyperdiversity. Of particular interest are the barriers to successful home and school relations. In particular, the perceptions that families and schools have of each other, of themselves, and of the histories that shape them. Funded through an Ontario Ministry of Education Parents Reaching Out grant, he's the principal investigator of an ongoing program of parent and teacher-driven research in schools in the GTA. So we've got a wide range of knowledge and expertise and perspective here. So again, welcome, and I think we'll take it away, John.
Thank you, Sue. I feel guilty. I'm the only one with a PowerPoint. I offered to ditch it, but Jacqui said you've got it, so you may as well use it. I was invited to respond to 2 questions. I'm going to do the general one first, and then I'll return to the issue of teacher education. So the first question asks, what are the biggest barriers to parents and teachers working as a team to help students? I'm going to turn to a very useful recent article by Hornby and Raphael. It's essentially a very large lit review of barriers to parental involvement in education, where they can emerge. And the 2 areas that are especially relevant to me in my work are what the authors call individual parent and family factors and parent-teacher factors. So I'll address the first one first, obviously. So with individual parent and family factors, here the authors include the role that parents imagine for themselves in their children's education, children's formal schooling, and importantly, the value they feel the school places on their involvement. Are they a resource or a pain in the neck? So I'll comment on this one first. Based on the data that I've worked with as a school-based researcher for these past 10 years or so at a number of boards in the GTA, and based now on my place as a parent of children in public elementary schools, I should have included that in my biography, I can say with some certainty that parents often find it difficult to gauge what is and is not an appropriate intervention on their part. And I'll personalize this. I'll use myself as an example. As a university-based researcher who studies education, parental involvement in particular, is it my place to suggest to my child's teacher an alternate approach to teaching content in the classroom? I'm waiting for an answer. Or what would be an appropriate response for me to give a teacher who suggests that taking my kids out of school for a month so I can conduct research abroad is disruptive to their education? I'm using these examples hypothetically. They may materialize. For the moment, I'm using them hypothetically to lend a sense of where and how parent and family factors can introduce challenges for parents in knowing what to do to maintain a healthy family and school connection. The second factor, parent-teacher factors. Here the authors include differing notions of parental involvement among and between parents and teachers. For example, where a teacher and school may prioritize the role of parental involvement in fundraising. I was reassured to see that that was raised as an example a few minutes ago in the plenary. Involvement in fundraising, for instance. Parents from minority backgrounds, like many of the ones that I work with, often see fundraising as irrelevant to their responsibilities. They may be more focused on their parental role in making sure their kids are doing their homework, or in a more contentious area, with the cultural dissonance between the values taught in the classroom and the values experienced at the kitchen table at home. My point, as in the case of individual parent and family factors, is that it can be very difficult for parents to negotiate expectations and roles across varied stakeholders in their children's formal education. It seems to me, did I miss any of my slides? No, okay. So it seems to me that this kind of difficult negotiation requires specific capacities. Capacities for communicating across differences, for changing one's point of view, for learning. And I think I heard this echoed in Bruce Ferguson's remarks a few moments ago. And in order to do this, I think we need a better understanding and explanation of this, what I'm calling the psychology of relationships among varied stakeholders in public education, including parents. And by psychology of relationships, I mean a better sense of questions like, how do these stakeholders understand and respond to each other in their day-to-day encounters? In the school office, when parents come up to pick up their sick child early. In a meeting with a teacher to consult on difficulties completing assignments. In a consultation with the vice principal to discuss an IEP or accommodation. Questions like, how do these stakeholders form opinions on priority issues? How much homework is too much or not enough? What role should a minority language play in a child's development? What rights should teachers have in collective bargaining? And crucially, can their views change? And if so, how and to what effect? And I should make it clear that when I'm referring to a psychology of relationships, I'm decidedly not drawing on cognitive psychology. I'm not locating psychology in people's heads. Here I'm following the discursive psychologists who say psychology is not in your head, psychology is in what you do. So this is my particular angle on an investigation of psychology of relationships. So, having spoken to the parent dimension of the relationship, I'll return to the teachers, since I was asked to do so. What and how are teacher candidates taught about managing their relationships with parents? What are their main goals? To begin, I'd like to broaden the notion of teacher education to include not just pre-service programs, and again, I heard this reiterated in one of the plenaries, but crucially, I think, in-service teachers. I work with both, with Bachelor of Education students in York's Faculty of Education and with classroom teachers, in-service teachers in my school-based research. Over these last years, I've become convinced that for teachers to form and sustain meaningful relationships with parents, they too require the capacities I mentioned earlier. Capacities for communicating across differences, for changing one's point of view, for learning. I've witnessed firsthand teachers who have developed these capacities form and sustain meaningful, resilient relationships with parents, and teachers who have not developed these capacities struggle to move beyond dysfunctional and sometimes confrontational relationships that the literature tells us has a negative impact on student success. So very briefly, what conditions and contexts are conducive to the development of these capacities? In the case of the in-service teachers I work with in my research project, the close encounter between parents and teachers working on a common research goal to learn something about their school community has indicated a positive impact. At a basic level, these teachers are able to sit and talk in focused ways about issues like discipline and safety and homework with parents as equal partners. And especially significant, I think, is the fact they discuss specific issues not in relation to a particular teacher or classroom or parent or student, but as an issue of broader importance to a school community. In my research school communities, we refer to this encounter variously as a dialogue among equals, home and school learning, and gathering under one tree. As for pre-service students, my best sense is that more could be done to prepare teacher candidates for parents. I don't know of any pre-service courses that address this area exclusively or as the course focus, though it is addressed in practicum placement and incidentally in some pre-service courses. For example, in the classes that I teach in psychology, philosophy, and sociology of education, I make the parent-to-school connection an ongoing point of discussion across the syllabus, hardly surprising in light of my research interests, and I encourage students to do practicum-based assignments involving teachers and parents. My aim in this is, once again, for teachers to begin to develop capacities for communicating across differences, for changing one's point of view, for learning. This, to me, is a prerequisite for healthy connections between teachers and parents, and a goal that would be well served by a better understanding and explanation of the psychology of relationships among stakeholders in public education. And this is the direction into which I'm moving my research now.
Oh,
Sorry,
such
surprise.
And I'm so surprised, I find it really interesting that there isn't actually a course dedicated to that, because maybe you can vouch for this, I don't know whether this is true, I heard several years ago, the teachers who are graduating out of Teachers College, when asked what their two biggest concerns are, it's how do they assess students and how do they deal with parents. So it's interesting that that still hasn't actually been addressed, and I would love to see a full course. We could teach it, really. So I've been asked to talk about some of the common concerns for parents when it comes to relationships with teachers, and also how to improve relationships. Now, it was funny when I was asked to talk about this, I also came up with a really long list of what parents can do to improve relationships with teachers, because I definitely believe it's a two-way street, and I'm going to be honest, I'm the parent on the panel, so some parents actually make it difficult, that relationship more difficult than it needs to be. So but I know Andrea's going to talk about that too, and then we'll just jump in. So, okay, so the most common concerns for parents. I am a great believer in communication, and I think probably one of the biggest challenges that we have is the failure to communicate enough or in a timely manner. Waiting until parent-teacher interviews to say your child's failing every course is not a good plan. Okay, parents get freaked out when 2 months into the school year they find out that their child's struggling. Not responding to inquiries from parents. Don't want to deal with that one, so I'm just going to ignore her. Hopefully she goes away. Or not communicating enough about what's happening in the classroom. Parents eat up what teachers do. We love everything about what goes on in school. I was telling the group this morning, I follow this school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Why? Because they tweet all the time about what's happening in their school. Teachers send out pictures. Here's our class working on iPads to do math. It sounds boring. I love it. I don't even have kids there. I actually want to have another child who go to that school. Okay. The way that they communicate, they have a Twitter feed up in their main hallway, so when kids go on field trips, they can tweet in and the school can enjoy the experience. Parents can also follow along from work or at home. I love that level of communication. The other challenge for parents is when teachers assume a defensive position right away. Okay. They feel threatened by parent comments or questions. Sometimes that's because of the way parents frame those comments or questions. I'll talk more about that when I say what parents can do. Another one, a lack of familiarity with the school community. Lots of teachers come from out of the school area, so I think it's really important that teachers learn about their school community, take a walk about in the community. For example, my sons, way back when they were in elementary school, we had a huge Muslim population at our school. So the boys on Friday afternoon were dismissed from school for an hour to go to mosque. Teachers were not aware of this. This is something that's really important to know. This is what we do in our school to accommodate different beliefs and religions in our school. So that's the kind of thing they need to know, that the mosque is right around the corner and that parent volunteers walk the kids to mosque on Friday to make sure they get there safely. So anything they can do to familiarize themselves with the community, it makes them feel more part of the community, and it makes parents feel more welcomed into the school. And lastly, I think it's something that Pedro talked about this morning, and I'm sure other people can come up with other things. These are what I came up with, is prejudging. Okay, prejudging kids based on, oh, I know they live in subsidized housing, so their parents aren't going to be involved, or, oh, you know, they're from this cultural background, or they're from this socioeconomic background, or my personal favorite, oh, I had his brother 2 years ago. Oh dear. I got that a lot as the second child. It's like, oh, you're Andrea's sister, but I'm really different, I promise, right? So not making those assumptions. So and I'm going through this really fast, because I've got 5 minutes. How to improve relationships with parents. I think the first thing is to be understanding of parents' passion and near obsession with their children. We are not always rational human beings when it comes to our children. We love them to death, and sometimes we don't act rationally. It's difficult for teachers to deal with an irrational parent, but there is a way. You need to try and work at it. I always use the example of the person I call Rob the Wonder Principal. He was my high school principal for a couple of years. And as the parent support person, I deal with all the phone calls come in. And often the parents that I am dealing with are at the end of their proverbial rope. They are angry and they are difficult. And I had a particularly difficult day where I'm going, and if this is the way you speak to the principal, I can understand why you're not getting anywhere, because I felt that they were yelling at me. And the principal smiled as he said this, and he said, well, you know, I had a parent come in a couple of years ago, and he just, and she was a she, furious, and just tore a strip up one side of him, down the other, about everything that was wrong, and then she said, and I just don't want you to think I'm one of those crazy parents. Well, what was his response? He said, absolutely not. You are an advocate for your child. You are the only advocate for your child. I want you to hold my feet to the fire. I will take it. If you need to come in here and talk to me, absolutely. Completely diffused the situation. That parent walked out thanking him, right? Just by acknowledging, I know you're having a difficult time right now, and I think for parents too, doing the other thing. I know how difficult your job is, because for every one of us, there's really a lot of other parents who are having the same issues. Don't make assumptions about families based on cultural, racial, or socioeconomic background. Try to help families overcome those barriers instead of exacerbating them. Don't fear parents. We really are nice people. We really try to be positive. So if you have a positive attitude about meeting them, you think it's going to be a good meeting when you come out of it, and how you can work together as a team to help a student, I think it makes a huge difference instead of jumping to, well, I do it because of this, or being defensive about it. Communicate early and often. I had a teacher who wrote a letter to my son in August saying, welcome to my class. I'm Mrs. So-and-so, I'll be your teacher, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you. Here's how to contact me. I loved her, favorite teacher. Okay, she did it before school even started. No parent will ever complain about getting too much information from the school, I promise you. And again, it may not seem exciting, but parents love to know what's going on in the classroom. Don't be afraid to use technology. There's a huge thing of it, oh, well, emails can be misinterpreted. Everything can be misinterpreted. If there's a problem with email, then you might have to pick up the phone to clarify. But a lot of parents, they can't be in the school during the day, or they're inaccessible. It would be great that I know that at 12 o'clock at night I can go onto my email and respond to a teacher's question, or email the teacher, and hopefully they're not up at that hour because they've got to get up early and go to school, but they can respond on their own time too. Am I doing time? 1 minute, oh geez, okay. Provide parents with an introduction package at the beginning of the year. How they'll be communicated with, what kind of information is going to be coming their way. How to set up a meeting, right? Different teachers have different things. You got to phone me, you got to email me, or just come up and talk to me at the end of class, but let them know what it is. And I think it's also important to have a bio, okay? Tell people about who you are as a teacher. I love the kid who didn't realize that they thought teachers lived at the school. Right? Like, they don't actually leave the school, do they? They're shocked to find that out. They need to know that teachers are human beings too, and so do parents, because sometimes we forget that too, right? So remind of your humanity, what you've done, kids you have, experiences you have. I think it's great to have a bio. And I'm just going to share the school council, make sure you know who the school council is, and tell parents about the school council so that they know how to access it. Teachers are often the first people that parents meet in the school. If you know about how the other resources out there, make sure you're telling parents about it. And warm, friendly smiles. I think it's really important. That's actually one of the most welcoming things you can have is, and I'm talking about all school staff from the secretary right through, a warm smile of acknowledgement when you walk in the school can go a huge way. My current secretary at my school, I love my school dearly, she's the scariest person on earth. And I have been for the last 4 years determined to make her laugh. I finally did it last year, I got her to laugh, but that shouldn't be the fact, right? I'm not a shrinking violet, as you can probably tell. I can imagine the sensation that parents would get who are not used to somebody like that, who's sitting there going, what do you want? So smiles and making people feel welcome. I'll stop.
I'm Andrea, and I apologize for my cough. I've probably got the same cough all of your children have right now. You know, teachers love to see people working, so I'm going to put you to work, and I'm going to ask you on that cue card that you have to draw a cup of coffee. You can do it. So it can be as simple or as complex as you want, and just, yeah, cup of coffee. If you don't like coffee, it's too bad. I do. It could be tea. You'll be all right.
Does it matter the brand?
Yes.
What's your favorite coffee?
Good question. We're going to get along fine.
I know I prepare my kids.
So when I first got the email from People for Education about the 2 points I was to speak to, I thought this is going to be fantastically easy. Jacqui and I were talking about this, and I was asked to talk about common complaints teachers have about connecting with parents and tips. Taught for about 10 years in the public education system. It's going to be so easy. So I sent out an email and talked with a group of teachers at my school and the school I'd been at before, asking them the same questions. And as I thought more about it, and as I got their points of view in, you know, for as many different types of parents there are out there and as many different personality types that there are in education, there are as many complaints. There are as many points of view. And so I went from easy gig to, oh my gosh. And also feeling, Jacqui had mentioned that when she was asked to reflect on things that teachers could do, you came up with more what parents could be doing, and I found the same thing too. There's that flip side. Well, I wish parents would do this. What am I doing to encourage that though? What I did find though is that every single person who responded, every teacher, understood the importance of connecting with parents and wanted a positive relationship with the parents. So, step away from that for a minute. Take a look at your coffee mug. Maybe take a look at the coffee mugs around the people around you. I'm hearing people say, oh, that's quite elaborate, or I just drew mine simply. Some people might have slogans. Some people might have, you know, basic coffee cups. You might have put something in your coffee cup. But we ask people to do this, most people draw, you know, the handle might be on a different side, but they're talking about the direction that they're coming at this cup of coffee at. And, you know, whether it's logos or where the handle is, any of that, basically we're talking about people drawing it in a similar, talking about the same thing, coffee, but approaching it from a specific direction. And if that's us, if your child is the coffee cup, the student is the coffee cup, with coming at it a certain way, we've maybe already set parameters around our role, right? So if we're looking at things from a specific direction, that's putting parameters on what we're doing as parents and teachers, but also on who that child is. So this is the way I'd like to tell you I drew my coffee cup when I was asked to do this. I didn't, but I think it's a really interesting way of looking at it, that bird's eye view. I'm not suggesting that we look down on children or children are empty vessels that we are there to fill up. I think it gives us a way of stepping back a little bit and seeing the directions that different players are coming at, those different, you know, parents, principals, teachers, where they're coming from as a stakeholder in the direction of the best interests of the child. And I think when we can see things from different angles, we're going to get a richer overview of who that student is, and I'll come back to that in a second. So from all of that, I think, is that the reason why this is difficult to say to you, well, here are your 3 tips as a parent. or here are your top 3 tips as a teacher. It's not black and white, it's complex. We're coming from different directions, we have different views, we have different things we value. So I'm going to try to cast a wide net but break it down into 3 points, 3 tips for you. So the first one, of course that's not going to work easily. Make the assumption as a parent that the teacher's there with the best interests of your child at heart. Will that be the case every single time with every single teacher? You know, it's human nature that you have people that are not there in the right interests of their job. That's going to happen in teaching too, but most people are there. I feel most teachers are there with the best interests of your child at heart. But what comes with that is that you're also dealing with a variety of different human beings with different values. And so that can create a specific perspective. So I think we have to accept that it's complex and embrace that there's a lot of power there in having different perspectives, but we also have to acknowledge we're not always going to be on the same page. And that means that issues, whether it's bullying, a learning issue, behavioral issues, often are going to be on a trajectory. So there's a learning process. It's not going to be solved overnight. You're going to have to do that in partnership. It's a good thing to be keeping in mind when you're talking about your child of why you're there, and that the 2 of you, the teacher and administration and parents, should be there to try to build a more resilient learner, and their goal is to learn more about the world around them and themselves. That should, I feel, should be our goal as we educate. Jacqui used the word communicate, which is not a bad word at all, but I just felt like when you say communicate, if I'm saying to you, my second tip is communication, I feel like it's a talking at someone. So I'd encourage you to share. Maybe that's a letter on the first day of school. Dear Madame Higgins, please know that this is how we say our last name. That's horrifying for a kid when their teacher can't even get their name right. As a teacher, you feel like an idiot when you find out 4 months in you've been saying this kid's name wrong and you didn't even ask. So a little note in the agenda, that was something that a parent did for me this year. I thought it was brilliant. Talk about the little things. So share that these are Brody's strengths. He loves to swim. This kid can't sit still in class. He can fish for 4 hours straight. Ask him to tell you anything about fishing. Teachers need to know that to broaden their understanding of your child. And let them know too your awareness of challenges. Yeah, we're really working on spelling right now, but we're also really loving how he improved last year in dance or in science. Share the big and the little things. So if you've had a major loss in your family, that's a really good thing for that teacher to know. So you might say, Jonathan lost his mother last year, and this isn't maybe something he'll be comfortable with you talking about in class, but I just wanted you to know. Let me know if you're seeing something that worries you. Share the little things too. Oh my gosh, Sandra just loved that harvest feast you did in October with the kids. And then the last thing I'd say is ask. Ask, ask, ask. Do not be afraid to say, wow, we sure didn't know what was going on with the homework last night. You're not going to be judged on that, or you certainly should not be judged on that. And that teacher might need to know, you know what, that homework is not working for kids. Don't be afraid to ask if you can help. You do not have to be in the classroom to help a teacher. So if you're wanting to be involved in the classroom, you could send a note, say, love to give you a hand. Can you let me know what I could do from home? And ask the best way for that teacher to get, for them to be contacted, and share with them what's the best way for you. Teachers should understand very well that not everyone can be in between the hours of 9 and 3:30. They sure can't be with their kids. So you let teachers know how's the best way to contact you. Email might be a great way for you. Not all teachers are comfortable with that. You'll have to work something else out. That teacher will have to do that, and you may have to as well. Ask, the last thing I'll just leave you with is, don't be afraid to ask for help if the communicating isn't going well. So you've tried with the teacher, you're feeling shut down, you've approached it, you've tried, ask your principal to help you. Ask for some help for navigating that relationship.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I've got half an hour for you. This is a great opportunity for you to pose. We've got teacher, parent, researcher, and many people I think cross over those. So if there's someone who'd like to start off by asking a question, and then I can sort of indicate to me if you'd like to ask a question as well, then I can try to keep a list. And, okay, I'm just gonna look around, cream sweater. Okay. I realized speakers list, I'm like, I don't know anybody's name. Okay, okay, I've got lots here, so, I've got green
So while
stripes.
Sue's madly writing
got
names and
black
descriptions
jacket.
down, I'm gonna be very impressed if she can go back and do this. I also want to mention, I think it's something for parents and teachers, don't wait for the bad news. Contact parents with good news, or contact teachers with good news. So call up your teacher and say, just wanted to tell you how much my kid loved that unit on dinosaurs. Or call up a parent and say, just wanted to tell you how wonderful it was that your child found that wallet and handed it into the office. We always like good news, but we always tend to go forward with bad news, so try good things too. Go ahead.
You have the things, Jackie? Yes, we'll start with
Jacqui here.
and Jackie.
There you go. I was new to our school council last year, and I was one of those people that walked into their first meeting and was chair 5 minutes later. I represent a fairly small school, comparatively speaking. We have 280 children and 190 families in London, Ontario. We live in Wortley Village, which was named one of the best villages to live in by Maclean's magazine a few years ago. And I think that speaks to the climate of the community. It was very close, very strong relationships. We live in a village in the middle of the city. And last year, with the teachers' actions, we had our community at the school was very, very close, and I had a large number of parents who felt that they were actually had friendships with their teachers, and with the actions that were implemented, all of a sudden, they realized they did not have friendships, and the trust relationship was damaged beyond belief. The impact of that was that we couldn't find volunteers. The child got lost in the middle of the politics. And teaching marketing for Western as well, I recognized very quickly that the impact of this action was not just, as much as we tried to keep the child out of it, the child was directly impacted. And I went to the head of our union at the school and said, look, it's destroying the climate at the school, the parent-teacher climate, the trust relationships. It's going, even if the labor situation is resolved in the next couple of months, we have a huge issue with rebuilding the climate and the trust relationships between parents and teachers. This is my second year as chair, and we're 2 months into the school year. I have the same issues. And even though the labor situation has been resolved to some extent, from what I understand, I have disenchanted parents, distrustful parents, children that are not getting I have teachers that don't want to have anything to do with parents because of their responses last year. I don't know how to fix that, because with all my knowledge of marketing, and marketing is not advertising, it's a small bit of it, but marketing is all about building relationships, trust relationships, value-based relationships where both parties derive value from being engaged with each other. I don't know where to start. So if you can give me something to start with, that would be good, because the rest of it is all theoretical.
I totally agree. I think that last year damaged a lot of relationships in most schools. I think it was hard on everyone. There are teachers who were passionate about, who wanted to do things that couldn't. One of the biggest problems was actually divisiveness within the school.
Yes.
So you had staff saying, I want to do this, and other staff saying, you do that, and I'm reporting to
Exactly.
the union. It happened in my
Yep.
high school where the
Yep.
staff were very close-knit, and the divisiveness.
Yeah,
Alas,
I
I
had
don't have
teachers
an
who were
answer for
scared.
you. I think it will take time to rebuild those relationships, and you just have to keep working at it. I wish there was an easy solution, but I don't know what the answer is. You're right, it did have a major impact. If anybody else has any brilliant ideas.
One and cheeseburger.
Why did you start? There you go.
I mean, my sense is that what's the possibilities that are open to you now are related directly to the kind of culture you had before. My sense is that if it was a healthy, functional relationship to begin with,
Yes.
then it should be resilient enough to bounce back after the trauma of last year's labor unrest. This has been my experience. In the schools where that culture existed, there's a bounce back. In the schools where it didn't exist, even though I thought it existed, the bounce back isn't happening.
Perhaps you and I should chat after.
Perhaps, yeah.
And I think
Thank you.
I can definitely see what you're saying. And we were having a conversation at lunch about this, with a parent and 2 teachers. What happened last year was extremely uncomfortable, very embarrassing at times, and really soured a lot of teachers about their job. No matter where you sat on that fence politically, it was a tough year. And I think teachers need to be able to hear that. It was a tough year for kids. So there was a lot of arguing about children were damaged. Teachers saying, well, children weren't damaged, but were there kids who got, as you said, lost because they didn't have those extracurriculars to go to? I think as a teacher, you'd be a fool to say no. Because also, teachers knew very well that when you're suddenly just aligning your practice along curriculum in the Education Act, you realize, hey, you know what, didn't really sign up just for that, and in fact, not finding it that interesting as a career. So I think you won't get anywhere by going back and reliving what happened, but just, I think it'll take teachers being able to listen to you, and you also being able to say, you are valued, no matter our differences.
Just very quickly, I've been asking to come into the staff meetings, and they still don't want council or parents to have anything to do with them.
Well, that should be I would direct that to administration.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to shut down the conversation. However, we've got track jackets up next on my list. I just want to make sure. So we have about 20
Throw
minutes.
back to the 80s.
So we have about 20 minutes. So if everybody could kind of like get right to the question.
I
Yeah.
promise mine will
Awesome.
be quick. I have a child in high school and I have a child in university. Both of them have different learning disabilities, and I'm just wondering, I'm addressing you specifically because you're at York. How can a parent actually be involved in a university student's,
Good question.
because they're adults,
Question.
but she has a learning disability,
Yeah.
there's no question about it. How do I have a relationship with a university professor? How do I do anything?
Very, very good question, and one that I haven't thought about in great depth. I know that, and Sue can speak to this as well, at York, there's, we have an office for students with disabilities.
Disability services, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there
I'm
are.
already involved with it, so.
And I mean, there are good people working there, and there are resources in place, and we also receive professional development around what we should be doing for students to accommodate their particular challenges in their classroom. Interestingly, parents are typically not part of that discussion. So I think you're raising a really important point. I mean, I would certainly be open to having a discussion with the parent of one of my students, but of course that begs the question, perhaps I should be doing the proactive work around that as well. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's a very interesting question.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna quickly say, and I also, I mean, I understand with the child with special needs, it's slightly different. You need to work with your child to say, can I come to these meetings or can I come, because they are adults, right? And we forget that. Even students who turn 18 and they're still in high school, when I tell parents, you have no right to access their report card, and they go, oh, wait a minute, and I said, and if your child's not willing to share it with you, that's actually a family issue, that's not the school's problem. But it is hard, they are adults. If I asked you to show me your tax form, you would say no, and they are in exactly the same boat, even though they are your children. So and I know it's tough in that situation, but you need to talk to your child too and say, let's work together to make sure you're successful.
I just wondered whether a professor would be open to that kind of dialogue or not.
Well, I would be. I can't speak for all professors, but I certainly
Thank you.
would be, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And you don't know till you try. Send them an email. I mean, if both, you know, the parent or the guardian and the student are in legal agreement, send them an email and, you know, feel them out.
You'd have to do it with the student though, because they have the right to privacy. So
Oh,
you'd
yeah,
have to
for
make
sure.
you-
And she's not trying to hide anything.
Yeah.
She's genuinely seeking my help.
Okay.
But you know, when I spoke to disability services, they said, she's an adult and we have to deal with her. And I was like, oh, okay.
You can be beside her.
Hands are tied.
Okay, thank you. Woman
Green?
answer?
Yes. So mine sort of piggybacks on what Jacqueline was saying, but in a different way. And I'm wondering how much parents know about the restrictions that are being placed on us at an administrative, I'm a teacher, I'm a resource teacher, by our unions, not even just last year, but there's a lot of talk around communications, and I can tell you one of the things that's drilled into us as teachers, you do not use email for correspondence. So we're constantly told horror stories, and our union has said on many occasions, you know what, you go ahead and do it, but if you get into trouble, we're not backing you up. And what I wonder about is we sit, I'm shocked actually at how often parents don't know exactly what went down last year, or they don't know that we're forbidden to use email. So I do it constantly. I'm comfortable, I'm trusting, but there's always people looking at me going, oh, Danielle, you're nuts.
And
Like,
have
your
you had
day
every
is
single
gonna
email
come.
come back to you saying, I don't understand what you said, right?
Well, you know what it is, what they've done is shown us examples of doing a reply and how parents have deleted words and changed words and taken teachers down a very, very dangerous professional path. So what I would like to know is how, and I wish we had a union and a principal sitting here as well. Andrea and I both were colleagues and we've done a lot of union, and I don't understand how we can get together as teachers and parents so that we can also say, you know what, awesome idea, would love to email. We have a union telling us that they're not going to back us up if one awful parent in 1,000 decides to turn the tables on us. So you'd be amazed at what is not a personal choice or even a professional choice. And parents really don't know the details of
I
that.
mean, it's really unfortunate when the 1 in 1,000 parents, like really, how many parents in this room would actually go in and delete words out of the teacher's email to try and get them in trouble? But it sounds like way too much work for me.
Yeah.
Of course there's examples, but they're probably literally 1 in 1,000 or maybe even 1 in
Yes.
10,000
Yeah.
or less, right?
Probably.
So the reality is, do we stop doing everything because, I mean, at People for Education, if we stop doing things because people complained about what we said, you'd never hear from us again. So I'm one of those, I must admit, I live firmly in the camp, but better to ask forgiveness than permission. Give it a shot, see what happens, you know.
And
But
I
it is
agree.
hard if the union's
But
saying
is there a
that, so.
forum where teachers and parents can come together
Mhm.
and talk about these things, like in the middle of job action last year, when we could have said, I mean, I heard somebody say it's been resolved, nothing was resolved at all. We just moved forward, and the biggest rifts, I assure you, are between colleagues.
I mean that doubly hard because typically, based on what I've seen, relationships between parents and teachers are typically dysfunctional to start with. And I mean that in all seriousness. I mean, if you thought about the typical parent-teacher relationship in the terms of a marriage, you would say, well, these people need counseling. So I think, and this is back to your point, Jacqui, I mean, I think if there isn't a culture of communication to begin with, the challenges and that's why I mentioned resilience, when the you-know-what hits the fan, then it's not only is it difficult, it's almost impossible to address it because you don't know how to talk to each other. You know, you haven't looked at each other. Part of what I've done in my research is facilitate conversations for the last 8 years. We call them community gatherings, right? Where essentially we poll parents for issues that they want to address. We put together an itinerary for the year, and we meet 4 or 5. It's a kind of alternative to school council, because school council addresses particular kinds of, logistical issues, administrative issues. We address a different texture of issue, like, discipline or divergences in culture and expectations between classrooms and homes, that kind of thing. And my experience has been where you can sustain those conversations when stuff like a labor disruption comes around. It doesn't mean the difficulty isn't there, but you just kind of find ways, you work together and find ways to move forward.
And we need that.
And I love that. That was one of my points. I said, build a good relationship early, because then when the problems come up, you can work through them with a level of understanding of each other. If you wait until those problems come up, you don't know how to talk to each other. So, go ahead.
Okay. The list is growing.
Nope.
Time is shrinking.
You're done
I
with
just want to say, I'm
creation.
glad you said that about the union, because I didn't know that,
I didn't
and
know
that
that
makes
either.
me think differently, and I will share that with other parents, so that.
But I also agree, you know what, I mean, I communicate all the time with parents, take a risk, but that's me, and I can't put that on my colleagues nor judge them one way or
I
another.
think it is also saying when you're at a union event, look, someone can take a note that I wrote to a kid and white it out and photocopy it,
Yeah.
make it look like I said all sorts of weird things to a parent or child, it's no different than the interwebs, you know, like that's still gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so we need to say as teachers, that's not working anymore. And you're
Yeah.
not in the classroom dealing with this, and you need to hear our voice on it.
And let it be known, our teachers do need to speak to our youth.
Yeah.
And we will.
Okay, thank you very much, then we'll
Hello, my question is, my kids, they go to French Immersion, and I teach them at home English, and their reading and writing level in English is good in their level of grade 3 and grade 4. My daughter start having challenges in grade 3, my older child, and the teacher and the principal and the special aide suggested that I should put on special IEP, individual learning plan. And I got a package. I had to write it down all the information, what is her challenging, what is this, what is that. I filled everything up, and then every time she does tests, she's not improving. And my question was, is it because I'm teaching different at home? I was talking to the teacher, and she said, no, you don't need to teach anything at home in French. You can just teach it in English, and then she will catch up. But she's not catching up, she's grade 4 now. And I was asking her, okay, whatever you're teaching at school, let me teach her at home in English. And they give us a package on the whole year, what they're supposed to learn. And assuming, am I gonna be teaching geometry at home, and then algebra be teaching, and then we're conflicting. So it's getting more confusing for the kids.
So just to clarify, your description, is the difficulty happening in English or in French?
In French. So.
How many languages are your children exposed to then?
3 languages.
3 languages.
Yeah.
The language acquisition literature suggests that for kids who are growing up in multiple languages, development, kind of curricular development can be delayed. So I think a knee-jerk response would be the wrong response right now. If there are supports that they...
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the idioms, yeah. I mean, a quick response, oh, she's behind this month, so we
Yeah.
have to do something, I think is not always well advised. In some cases, you simply have to wait for the child to catch up. That's what the language acquisition literature tells us. Having said that, the reward is that when they do catch up, they're smarter than the others. They're more cognitively sophisticated than the other kids.
And it really is true, having those languages is invaluable, so.
But if supports are made available to you that you think would be useful to your children's learning, then you should make you should take up the offer.
I did take it, and the thing is that even though she's seeing extra help, she's not improving. So how do I ask the teachers to tell me every week and every day what they're learning, so that I can help them at home in English? So how do I I don't want to burden the teacher, because there's so many.
You would if you asked them to do it every day.
So how do I do it?
But the other thing is that I'm going to really emphasize here, you do not need to be teaching your child the curriculum. I tell parents this all the time. I get really worried when parents say, I'm teaching the curriculum. Your job as a parent is not to teach the curriculum. Alas, that's the poor teacher's job. That's what they were put on this earth to do. Your job is to give your children the skills that they need to be able to learn the curriculum from the teacher. So positive attitude about school, building their study skills, ability to deal with distractions, all of those sort of the soft skills that help them learn the curriculum. But if you feel that you're spending a lot of time actually teaching the curriculum, there's a problem there that you do need to address with the teacher, because you shouldn't need to do that. And trust me, by the time they get to grade 9, you won't be able to help, because grade 9 math is really hard, so.
It's not the same anymore.
It's not the same as when we went to school, yeah.
But one moment, if you don't actually work with your child at home, they won't perform in tests. Like you have to tell them what a spelling test is, and this is the words, and tell them how to study for that test. The teacher is not.
Tell them how to study for the test, but maybe not tell them how to, this is how you do the math, this is how, you ask them to focus on their homework, you ask them, and teach them how to ask for help, right?
That's not, like, if I do that, and my children are not having any problems in school, they will not pass the test. Because whatever the instruction, well, not the instruction too, but whatever the instruction is happening in school, sometimes you have to go over the concept home again, and it's like whether it's borrowing or whatever the thing is, so you have to go over it. So and I've asked the teacher, am I supposed to be doing that? Because I know I went to school 30 years, 40 years ago, so I know it's different. right? But she just was no response, not saying, and every teacher asks, that's the response they get. So I just reviewed that.
Okay,
Andrea, you use French Immersion. What do you
give
think?
a 30-second, one tip.
10 minutes.
Sorry, it's not to cut it down.
I would say, yeah, discussions at home, I get that strengthens learning for sure. I would try to keep it to discussions, how we're studying for us. So if it is a spelling test, yeah, kids haven't done a deep day before, I'd give a mock one. Would I always be doing that at home as a parent? No, but I would be discussing what's going on in the classroom. When you're talking about doing everything in English, is there a reason why you're doing English instead of, say, does your daughter speak your first language?
Yeah, she speaks, but I came here when I was 15, and we had to go to work back home. So I can speak Somali, but I'm not went to the school curriculum in Somali. So I learned English.
I was just thinking, be really careful not to dismiss the importance of your first language and your children being able to have a conversation with you at home about what they're doing in French class.
Yeah,
that will build her French literacy skills. It will help.
Okay, we're turning to Mr. McLean.
I am a teacher. Please don't shoot the messenger for this comment. I wanted to talk a little bit about what Mr. Ippolito was talking about.
John is fine.
John, sorry. A lot of you are talking about the one-on-one communication with your individual teacher of your child. I am here on behalf of the union. Our union has a committee for community outreach. And, John said that there was already a poor relationship between parents and teachers in general before this labor action happened. And, it's systemic. It's across the entire province that there's a lack of communication between parents and teachers. And the labor action that took place has only worsened it. Okay? We want to build back up those relationships. We want to open the lines of communications between parents and students again. But we struggle in how to even do that. You have parent councils within schools, and, the legislation around that and the rules around that say that a teacher can sit in on that meeting. But the teacher goes to the meeting and sits there mostly like this.
So it depends on your counsel.
And there is very little communication between the parents on that council with that teacher. And is that teacher really representing all of the teachers within the school? I question whether that's really happening. It might be happening in some places, but I don't think it's happening in all places. And we want to improve those relationships so that, the unions aren't all about wages. The media might try and say that, but that's not what the unions are all about. The unions are also about improving the conditions within education, reducing class sizes, getting more specialists in special education, reducing the numbers in full-day kindergarten. The unions didn't get to talk about any of those things last year. We didn't get to bargain. And people have to understand that we're still struggling with those things. And nothing improved with education because we didn't get to bargain any of those things. So, I feel badly that I'm surprised that you had positive relationships with your parents and that now those ties have been severed. And I hope that you can rebuild those relationships, because I can guarantee you that there are teachers there that don't want to stay separated. I felt guilty that I wasn't doing the extracurricular activities. I wasn't not doing the extracurricular activities because my union had told me not to. I was doing it because that was the only action that I could take. I didn't have a voice, and that was the only way that I could voice the fact that I could no longer do anything to improve education in general.
Okay, so I'm going to be brief. Do you have a question, or for the panel, or you just?
Well, so John, how do you think we can open those lines of communication?
Well, the bridging, I would call them bridging exercises, between parents and teachers. They certainly have to go beyond school council.
Absolutely.
As I look back at my own work, I think I kind of did it, unintentionally, but now that I think about it, it was actually quite intentional. I knew that school councils were very particular kinds of creatures with a very particular kind of mandate. And I knew that the kind of culture development within schools that I wanted to do couldn't happen in those school councils. I mean, the first thing I would do when I would bring a new school on board is go visit school council. And then we would move about creating, I wouldn't even call it an alternate forum, but a supplementary forum. We called them gatherings or home and school learning. And we would essentially, after school, bring together teachers and parents who were interested. And crucially, I think we ate together. We always had a hot meal for respecting dietary and religious restrictions. We would have daycare available. And we would talk about issues that, and clearly we privileged the parents' priorities here, issues that parents wanted to talk about. But those provided opportunities for parents to begin to understand that teachers are humans. They have kids, they have mortgages, they belong to teachers' federations, they face challenges. And that kind of face-to-face interaction began to build cultures of resilience, so that when something like this happens, as it did last year, there's some flexibility. It'll give a bit, and it won't be all roses, but it will bounce back because a prior culture exists for that kind of
And I think
interaction.
more of those kinds of activities are really important. I was in Durham this week, and they had a gathering of principals and school council chairs. And so everyone was there together, and it was amazing because you're talking to each other in a whole different context from being in the school and those kind of things. So the more we can talk to each other as human beings, the more those relationships get built.
But I just want to thank the speakers for their time and for their thoughts.